Best. Okay, well, welcome to the both of you. And as folks come in, feel free to leave questions, leave comments in the chat as I'm kind of talking through this. Today's topic is rubrics. Over the course of the last couple sessions that at least I've been doing, stuff that's been really centered on the gradebook, how to use different gradebook functions within Moodle. And people are probably aware that the rubric function is available within Moodle, but how do you access it? How do you edit it? What are rubrics good for? All questions I'm hoping to answer here. So let's get started. Uh, well, even before that, we are at whatever session 5 here of our mini Moodle workshops. I'm never gonna get that right on the first try. There are still 2 left that we're offering to you folks because you've all have signed up. As Becky was saying to Andrea as we were getting in here, you have access to the videos on demand right now, so you can go back to the event page and view the previous recordings if there was a topic that you were really interested in, just weren't able to make it. If you have not registered for these yet, this handy QR code will allow you to register for the remaining events here. In addition, we do have a managing Moodle storage. I forget the whole acronym. Uh, Throughout November and early December, talking about topics specifically about how to handle file storage within Moodle. Highly encourage folks to check those out as well because that's a topic here across campus. Um, as opposed to just like, hey, we're working with Moodle here. So if you haven't signed up, please do sign up. As we get these videos collected and collated and edited, we will be throwing them onto a Google site. They will live in perpetuity and continue to update them as new features roll out from Moodle. So what even is a rubric, right? Like you might be familiar. Andrea, I'm sure you've written hundreds of these things throughout your career. Danielle, I'm not sure how familiar you are with rubrics, but rubrics are primarily ways to grade things based on set performance criteria measured against a type of standard, right? And this is just a really quick example of what a rubric can look like. It often will take the form of a table where on the left-hand side, the leftmost column, you have some type of performance task. That performance task is then measured against a ranged, scaled standard of performance, usually starting with something like beginning or approaching, and then ultimately you end up with meeting and then exceeding the expectations for that performance criteria. These are really, really handy things. What they do is they provide detailed feedback for students as they're going through an assignment. They're able to look at a rubric and measure what they're producing versus pre-set up metrics of what an A looks like, what a B looks like, and so on and so forth down the line. They're able to actually see roughly how they're going to be doing on the assignment as they're producing it. It does allow for weighted areas. So you might, as you know, if a student is presenting a topic, if they're producing a slide deck, if they're doing some type of performance in an assessment, you might want to weight certain aspects of that performance against more rudimentary tasks. Rubrics will allow you to do that rather than just like throwing a grade up there. And this is handy too, and this is a case across campus as well, where you might have multiple sections of a course. One instructor might be teaching one section, and then another instructor might be teaching another section. Rubrics will help create a more consistent grading guideline for folks as they're grading things. If all instructors are using similar rubrics, then they're able to, assess and adjust their students' grades based on that same rubric across the line there. So welcome to Maureen. Nice to see you.
Hi, let me get it out of the sunshine here.
No
Okay, here I
worries. No
am.
worries. We're talking about rubrics today. Uh,
That's riveting. Riveting.
absolutely. Some good use cases for rubrics. They're really great for performance level assessments, right? Things where students are writing essays, if they're doing research projects. I already mentioned presentations. Big performance type stuff. Um, they're also really handy with more formative assessments, things where students might be building up towards a larger summative assessment, right? If they're preparing a big research project, there might be multiple steps along the way where they are building the research and building the justification for that research. Rubrics can help give them that transparency so that they're building up towards a larger goal. Uh, Not as good for like, let's say, like, your kind of standard quiz or exam, right? If you've got a quiz with a lot of multiple choice questions, short answer questions, true false questions, probably not a good application for a rubric. Those are going to be pretty binary choices, pretty singular problem sets. Not a good indication for a rubric, but these larger projects that you might have, really, really good applications. There are some drawbacks. They take a lot of time. They take a lot of time to build. They take a lot of thought to build out. You want to really think about the sequential order of your standards and metrics. You want to think about the criteria that you are assessing your students on. And then consequently, because we're all really, really good at this, if you tend to build very, very large rubric with a lot of criteria, with a lot of standards and performance metrics, uh, sometimes for students that can be a lot of information, right? And it's hard to parse out that information. You can build that into discussions around an assignment, but it can be very unwieldy for students that don't do well with all of that information at the front of it. So, how do you construct one? As I mentioned, you want to build it out starting with your criteria. What is the performance level aspect that you want to measure for your students? And that's going to be really, field of study appropriate. That's going to be very specific to whatever is going on in the course. If they're doing something like a presentation, you might want to have a criteria that's for their public speaking abilities. You might want to have a separate criteria for their research and their justification for their research. That's going to be largely dependent upon what's going on in your course. And I can help provide that guidance. You can make an appointment with me. We could talk about what you're thinking and what students are going to be doing for that particular assignment and build the rubric out from that. As you're building out your different standards for measurement, there's a lot of different schools of thought on it. If you were to put me, Andrea, and the rest of the education department in the same room, we'd probably all have different opinions about how you would construct the rest of this thing. Typically speaking, you're probably going to want at least 3 to 4 different standards for performance, uh, ranging on a scale of exceeding expectations to something like beginning or approaching expectations. As you can see in my kind of rough example here, I've outlined meet expectations. There's a purpose for that. When I'm thinking about what I want my students to be doing for a particular assignment, for a particular assessment, I want them to be going for that one. That's really where I think most students are going to be. That's where I'd ideally like them to be. We know that some students are really highly capable and they're aiming for the stars. That's where that additional exceeds expectations really comes into play. They've got something to shoot for if they've got the preparation, if they're really diving into an assignment that way. And then you've got on the other side of meet expectations, you've got other different metrics to apply for various other things within there. Because it's a table, and I'm gonna say this before we even get into the Moodle stuff, right? Because we gotta eventually bring this into Moodle. As you're starting to think about your rubrics, or if you already have rubrics within Moodle, I highly recommend that you bring them into some other format before Moodle. This is gonna really help you out when you're starting to plot these things out. It'll give you a more safe space to really try out some different language, to throw them at me, for instance. It's really hard for me as an instructional designer to go into a course and look at a Moodle rubric kind of divorced from an assignment. Um, I highly recommend Google Sheets. We are a mostly Google house here. It sets things up in a table very beautifully. You can organize things as you want. You can play around with a couple different formats that way. Excel, same thing. Any type of like spreadsheet editor is going to be really helpful for that. You could also use something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word that does have an additional table function in there. Really, it's just to organize your thoughts. Once you bring things into Moodle, there's a lot more that you can play with, and there's a lot more that you can do with them. But that's just my recommendation. Go in ahead of time, prepare it. Then you've got it in a separate document in case something goes haywire in Moodle. Then we can just bring in that other document there. So, before we move into the Moodle part, this was kind of the preamble. Anybody have any questions, comments, things they'd like to bring up? Yes, Maureen.
So one of the things, Ryan, I'm finding is most people don't know how to use Google Sheets. I sort of wing it, but I know our
Okay.
administrative assistants have both said they've never been trained and really don't know how to use it. And I think that's
Sure.
probably true for others. Um, some of us do it without training, so maybe we're not using it very effectively. So I just put that out there as sort of a step before that too, because I
Yeah.
think there's an appetite for some of those sorts of trainings as well. Danielle, I don't know if you've heard anything about that. No. So this is a conversation that I think I've had with Andrea and with Megan a couple of times.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I couldn't get my cursor in the right place. Yeah, no, I've definitely had that conversation, especially like well, for students for sure, they have no idea how to use these
They
things,
have no idea.
Yeah.
but yeah, some adjuncts as well are just like I don't know how to use any of that Google stuff. So,
Right. And honestly, what I don't know when we switched to Google and all that other stuff because the students used to get access to Word and
Yeah.
that whole suite. And I think it switched, but when it switched, I don't know because I still have them do everything in Word and they do it. Just as far as,
Yeah.
different platforms go. I rarely get anything through Google Sheets, sometimes Google Docs, not actually that often. So I just put that out there as sort of
No.
a
Yeah, that
before.
that's really great feedback, and I want to respond to it kind of backwards, right? Because when I say we're like a mostly Google house, that's what I'm talking about. We do have access to the Microsoft suite of stuff. That's Word, Excel, PowerPoint, the whole nine yards. We also have access to the Google Workspace stuff. There's some similarities between the two, right? Like a lot of functionality. If you're just going in for like basic word processing, not going to be a whole lot of functional difference between Word and Google Docs, for instance. Um, the reason I like kind of say like mostly Google House is because we all have our at elms.edu addresses that's
Right.
tied into Gmail as like the primary email client. Um, Either or kind of works, right? And so now backing up even further, um, if a training like in how to use like a spreadsheet editor would be handy, or using some of the more advanced functions within Google Docs, Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, that'd be great. Yeah, maybe that's something we could plan on for the spring. I don't know if IT is offering other trainings there. I don't want to like step on their toes too much as
I'm
I'm
not
looking
sure
at
what
Becky.
they're offering, but I do have a staff meeting this afternoon, so
Great,
we'll
great.
bring
We can
that up.
bring that up with them. Yeah, because if that's going to be valuable, not just for students, right? Like that's a whole mode and method we'd want to approach on like its own terms. But for faculty and adjuncts that don't feel comfortable using either set of tools, maybe like a brief introduction to what they are, what they do, what are some of the more advanced things that would be valuable from like the instructor perspective. Yeah, we could plan on that.
Mhm.
That'd be great.
Great.
Cool. All that to say, if you are comfortable using Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, it setting up your rubrics in either one of those probably going to be for the best. There are a number of tools online that will also help you set up rubrics. Rubistar is like the one I'm picking off the top of my head, but there's like 1,000 different tools. If you just look up rubric builder in Google, there'll be 3,000 pages worth of different tools and kind of like web apps designed specifically for this. So great. So, how do we get this set up in Moodle, right? And there's a lot of different avenues to take. I'm assuming this from the like assignment level. Discussion forums, other different modules within Moodle will all have these kind of different options. Typically, if there is a module within Moodle that features a grading pull down, and I'm sure we're all familiar with like that little tab that says grade, chances are you're going to be able to make these adjustments here. So normally you're going to see like that grade, what type it is. It's that grading method tab. Now, by default, it's under simple direct grading. By clicking on it, it brings down a little drop down, and there's three different ones. Not even going to talk about grading guides today. That's like a whole other thing to talk about. But from there, you can set it up as a rubric. What this does for the assignment is it brings up a new tab, and that new tab is called Advanced Grading. So once you bring back up that assignment, depending on how you're saving it, you either save and return to course or you just save changes. If you need to get back to it, it's going to be that Advanced Grading tab within the assignment itself. You see here, I've got my kind of sample testing assignment. I've named it Rubric just to keep it honest for me. And on that tab, I've got advanced grading. Clicking on it will bring up a new menu. And from the new menu, you get to two different options, either defining a new grading rubric from scratch or importing one based on a template. And I'm going to talk about creating a new one from scratch first versus creating one from a template. Some similarities there, but if you don't have a Moodle rubric yet, you're going to want to start with that leftmost one. That's going to be the best place for you. So first things first, and this is true across all of the Moodle environments, you want to give it a name and you want to give it a description. My recommendation is keep it obvious for yourself. Largely, students are not going to see the name of that individual rubric, especially if you're copying it over into other templates, things like that. But you're going to want to name it something so that when you're looking at it, it's going to be real easy for you to see it. For instance, I teach the Intro to Web Design course, and I've got 3 or 4 different rubrics that I'm using for that course. One that's used specifically for the coding labs, another for discussion forums, etc., etc. I will name them after the course and then what its intention is, right? So CIT 2506, coding lab rubric, and be very, very specific for it, because when you need to go hunting for it, you want to be able to look at it at a glance and get that information. Under the description, you're also going to want to be very specific, right? Is this for graduate level? Is this for undergraduate level? Do you have different weights? And that's really just information for yourself. Students largely aren't going to see this information. This is all behind the scenes stuff for you and for other faculty in case they're going to be using these rubrics down the line. So below that, you're going to have your name, you're going to have your description, and here is the rubric editor. Now, before, when I mentioned kind of setting this up in another document like Google Sheets or Microsoft Excel, this is largely why, because it looks a little clunky, it looks a little kind of congested there. On the left-hand side, that's where you edit your criterion. That's where you're putting in your actual performance tasks that you're asking your students to do. Across each one of these levels, that becomes then the performance standards, right? And by default, Moodle will give you 3 different options. You can always add more levels. I recommend generally 3 to 4 per performance metric. That's going to be largely up to you if you're working with multiple faculty or adjuncts. You guys can have discussions about that. Yes, Andrea.
Is there a way to do half points?
I don't think so. Becky, correct me if I'm wrong. There is not a way to do a half point.
I don't believe there is. I have never had that question before, though.
That's a really good
So
experiment.
I'm going to test it on the side right now.
Yeah, test it on the side. I don't believe there is. What you could do.
Because I know sometimes, I don't know about other people. Sometimes I feel like, I'm like, oh, they don't really should be getting a 3,
Right.
but not a 2. I'm like, well, maybe a 2.5, 2.75. We've done that. And when I use Canvas,
Yes.
right, we could give,
You could give like a
0.75,
3/4
whatever.
grade, yeah.
Which
So I
that
just-
may be more of a grading guide
Yeah, that would be
versus a
more.
rubric, where grading guides you can give ranges.
Yeah.
No, this
The
was a
other thing,
rubric. We did rubrics.
the only other thing, and I want to test out the decimal system here. The other thing you can do, and Andrea, this just comes from like battling years of just education experience, right? Is that we typically will have like the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 scale for our performance standards. We could actually up these to, multi-digit numbers. So you could make, one of them, 4, 3, 2, or you can make it 40, 30, 20, 10, and kind of achieve a rough decimal point that way. I'll do some investigation on the decimal points. I don't see why not. I've just never done that. No, that's really good. But anyways, so once again, you can add levels depending on what your needs are. In Moodle here, it does sequentially order it. It starts it at 0, 1, 2, and then it'll go to 3, 4. That's by default. Don't worry about the order of that. I know some folks they like to put the 4.1 first. We'll be able to change that in the settings later on. You can also add in additional criterion here, and we're just essentially building out a table. And this is why I recommend using some type of external tool just to get your rubric set up in some other location. Because what I end up doing, and I've done this with my rubrics, is I'll have it in Google Sheets, Excel. I'll set up my ranges, how many levels I need, and then I just copy and paste the text content from that other source into here. That's just from using Moodle. This is not a great interface for putting it in. We're just trying to get stuff set up within the Moodle ecosystem. So that's why I recommend using some other type of tool for this. Now we do get a number of options here at the bottom. There's a lot of different things in there. I actually recommend for all of the checkboxes to leave them checked. There's a lot of reasons why, and a lot of it has to do with the display, how rubrics are going to be displayed for students, what their options are for being able to add things like comments and suggestions on top of the rubrics. We want to give students those options. As you're looking through these, if you're looking at one and going, allow grader to add text remarks for each criterion, and you're thinking, I don't really want to get that type of feedback from students, you can uncheck those. I'm just recommending from the instructional design hat perspective, leaving these checked. That way students can add in their own suggestions, or they can ask questions about a rubric as they're seeing it. You can, speaking of which, set the sort order for the levels. So if I go back here, once again, by default, they go by 0, 1, 2, 3. They're in ascending order. Rather than going through and changing that manually, you can use the Moodle rubric options to make those descending or different order options. You get power that way. So don't be too attached to what you've set up at the Moodle criterion above, because you can set the different sort orders on the other side of that. So once you've saved your rubric, the big blue button that allows you to save it, you'll be able to preview and see what is going on there. And I've just got a simple kind of test one here for a use case. You can either save your rubric as a draft, or you can fully publish it. Either option is great. If you know you're going to be returning back to a rubric, you've gotten it started, you're working collaboratively with some folks to set up your rubrics, saving as a draft can be useful, because then you can go back in, you can edit it before it's published to students. Once it's ready to be published, then students will be able to engage with it. You can use it in the grading function. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, because one of the other options that you are able to do here is to publish that rubric as a template. Why would you want to do that? Well, we've talked about some of the use cases there. You want to bring it into another section of a course. Maybe you have a rubric for discussion forums that will apply broadly across multiple courses that you teach. You might want to bring it into some other environment, some other course. You might want to be able to share it. That is where this publish the form as a template is very, very handy. So now from the other side, right? We defined a new one from scratch. We got that button there on the left. If you were to create a new grading rubric from a template, it brings up every template that you've ever published there. That's what I've done with my discussion forum rubrics, is I know roughly that depending on the courses that I'm teaching, all of my discussion forums, I want to use the same criterion. I want to use the same performance metrics across all those different courses in there. So I publish it as a template. So when I click that button, I'm getting the list of everything that I've published as a template. Scroll down, find the one that I want to use here. Now, you can use this template as a button. From that, you can also delete it. That's going to be kind of up to you. If you have an old rubric from the past, you can always delete it, or you can select to use that as a template. Once it's in there and attached to that individual assignment, you can go back, you can edit it. And that'd be great for use cases where you might have a graduate course. You want to use your discussion forum rubric for your graduate course, but add an additional criterion for rigor. That's going to be largely up to you and context dependent for your course. I'm casting a wide net with this discussion. Now, when students go in to make a submission, and this is from the assignment module, but this is going to be true regardless of the activity. If it's a gradable activity where they're submitting something, they're going to be able to see your rubric attached to this. So here I'm in the student view. I'm actually in Big Bird, Becky, and Big Bird hasn't submitted anything yet. But when Big Bird goes in to add a submission to this individual assignment, here at the bottom, they see the grading criteria. That's the rubric that I've already set up. Now, this is a very simple rubric. there's not a lot going on, but they're able to see it and be able to look ahead of time and go, oh, okay, this is what a 2-point metric looks like for me. This is what a 3-point metric looks like for me. That creates transparency for students. They know what their buy-in is there for each one of the components. From the instructor side, when you go into grade things, and I just didn't happen to grade Big Bird's assignment yet, it will, once again, on the right-hand side, show you the rubric that you already have created, and you can go in and you can select the metric that that student performed at. Big Bird got 1 point. That's great. You can see the text gets a little small because it's on that right-hand drawer. And then you can also add in feedback for students. And I do this a lot, right? If a student is approaching expectations and didn't quite meet expectations, I'll provide context for them so they know roughly, okay, here's where an area where you can improve, adjust this, adjust that, wherever it happens to be. Depending on the module, right? If I'm looking at an assignment, I can also annotate their assignment and provide that immediate context right there so that they know exactly what they need to do if I want to give them another opportunity to increase their grade. So just some last minute tips in case you're really not comfortable with, creating a rubric. First things first is, because we're measuring student performance in specific areas, think about what those verbs are that students doing. Are they presenting something? Are they justifying something? Are they designing something? Those verbs are going to help guide the creation of your specific criterion, and how specific those verbs are, especially if they're aligned with Bloom's. You can then create that scaled performance metric based on that. I do recommend that when you are writing your standards, start with the meet expectations, right? We know the highest is going to be exceeding expectations. Start with whatever meet expectations it's going to be for your students, because that's largely where most of them are going to end up. What does that baseline student assignment look like for that individual criterion? Once again, harping this from the mountaintop, I would not start with the Moodle rubric editor. As we saw from these screenshots, it looks a little clunky. It can be a little weird to set things up in there. Start with some other external document of your choice. Google Sheets, Excel, they're great because it's already in a table format. You can add in different tabs. We'll do a training on Excel at some point. I'm making a promise to myself in the future. But whatever text editor you use, start there, and then you can copy and paste those into the Moodle rubric editor. It's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to save you a lot of headaches. If things go wrong within Moodle, you've got that backup in another location. I also recommend, despite the fact that students will be able to see your rubrics when they submit an assignment, depending on the module that you're using within Moodle, I would share them anyways. It's just really good practice. You want students to know what an A is going to look like for an individual assignment, and that's part of the benefits of rubrics, is it creates that transparency for them. Don't hide it, just show it to them. Let them know what that A is going to look like, what your expectations are for an assignment, and give them the opportunity to rise to the occasion. So I think hopefully we've mastered the secret fire here. That's a Gandalf reference for anybody that's a Lord of the Rings nerd like I am. There's a lot to talk about with rubrics, and I've cast a wide net because there's a lot there. I could spend 6 hours talking about rubrics and different ways to construct them, but within a half hour, I think we've accomplished a lot. Any questions? Any comments? How are we feeling? We feeling confident? Okay, great. Marie, I'm gonna see you soon, yeah? Maybe we can add Excel onto our
Right. I think it's more sheets than Excel.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I may be making something up, but maybe not.
No,
So,
no, you're sharing genuine feedback, genuine concern. If there's things that you're seeing, chances are
right,
I'm not seeing it for one reason or another. That's great.
right.
We can create stuff on
Very
the
good.
back of that and get everybody caught up.
No, this is great. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna stop the recording here. If other folks have other questions for post-recording stuff, just feel free to send them to me. Otherwise, I will see everybody in the next training.